Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Always an Expat, a podcast for British expats in America by British expats in America, dedicated to elevating expat stories, brought to you by fellow British expat, yours truly, Richard Taylor. So my guest today is Barry Richards. Barry is the group president at First, a leading global brand experience agency, and we're going to talk about Barry's journey from chef in the UK to corporate event management in New York and life in the American suburbs raising a young family. He's practically around the corner from me in Connecticut. All right, so let me just get the boring stuff out of the way. Always an Expat is a podcast about the expat journey, specifically being a Brit in the US. It's brought to you by Plan First Wealth, which is a business I founded and run today, and we work with successful British expatriates living across the US, people like the ladies and gents who feature on this show, and we help them make the most of their opportunity, avoid the landmines, and one day to retire happier. Now, with that being said, whilst Plan First Wealth LLC is an SEC-registered investment advisor, the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Plan First Wealth. Information presented is for educational purposes only. So, without further ado, let's do this. Hi, Barry. Welcome to Always an Expat.
Hey, Richard. Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Right. Well, as promised, let's talk about the journey. So you're just around the corner from me in Connecticut, Wilton, right? Wilton?
Western, so not far.
Western.
Yeah.
Western, yeah, just around the corner.
Yeah.
And Westport, a lovely part of the world, this, isn't it? What do they call it? The Golden Corridor, is that?
I'm not sure, but I always describe it.
No, this part of Connecticut that is the commuting town to where people commute to New York.
Yeah.
Which I think is mad, by the way.
I was on the train yesterday. So,
how long did it take you?
So the train ride is about 70 minutes, but I get a good walk in, once you get to the city and get the vibe, and then I enjoy getting off the other end back to the burbs. It's cool.
Right. Door to door, how long does it take you?
Door to door's about, if everything's on time, it's about 2 hours, got to say.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure you don't do that every day now.
No.
But pre-pandemic, there were a lot of people doing that commute each way every single working day. And that, as a Brit, so I'm from Manchester, you could I think on the train you could get to London in about 2 hours, maybe a bit longer. I never did. It just was like, that was miles away. So I know the distances in America are just vastly more than any British person can comprehend, but if a 2 hour journey for me is about the limits of before I start getting twitchy, a 2 hour commute every day, each way, blows my mind.
It blows my mind now myself, to be honest, but when you look back, I'll blow your mind a little bit more. So the train line is from New Haven, which is another hour further out. And I would say that in the majority of cases, the train is already full by the time it gets to Westport. So there's people that are commuting 2 hours each way just on the train every day for the benefits of Fairfield County and family life in this area.
Right. So the reason I got started on this tangent is because they call this the Gold Coast because it's a beautiful part of the world, and it's theoretically, in my opinion, commuting distance to New York. People do it. I would never do it. We're in Greenwich, and it's an hour door to door, 45 minutes on the express train. I still don't really. It's still too much for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's its own. It's a lovely part of the world, right?
Incredible.
So, tell us how you ended up here.
Well, it's funny actually because we landed in Costco in Greenwich, so close to where you are now, and some of the things I remember. A couple of my first interactions with friends were people working down on downtown, so they would have that whole journey just from Grand Central right down to downtown as well. So that was a whole.
People never factor that in. They don't realise. They just think you're in New York. You're here. No, Grand Central is still a significant distance from downtown New York.
100%. So, I had worked in agencies in Europe and had benefited from travel. Always had a bit of a travel bug. and got to a point where I reached sort of the career path at the company I was at, a ceiling, so to speak, and sort of pretty much went, look, if there's something opportunity abroad, I'd be interested. Let's have a look. I think I was telling you, Rich, the on the Friday there was an opportunity in Singapore and New York, and by the Monday the Singapore opportunity had gone, and it was New York, and literally we had one prospective contract, and it was pretty much let's give it a shot. We want to try and build a global proposition within a an agency model. Would you be interested? I'm like, sure, let's give it a go. And I was just reflecting actually before we got on. The first 6 weeks, it started in January. First 6 weeks was back and forth between the UK, so I flew back every weekend to see my family. It was major snowstorms, so a couple of times got snowed in New York.
When is this?
2010.
2010. Okay.
2010.
So 2010,
Yeah.
you're working in London prior to this.
Yeah.
You get this opportunity. There's an opportunity within the company you're working for, Singapore or New York. Two days later, over the weekend, Singapore's gone, so it's
Yeah.
New York or nothing. And then the first 6 weeks, it's it's do or die right here. You've got to make something happen, or the opportunity evaporates.
And we had, yeah, the prospective contract. It wasn't in place. It was challenging. It was investment bank, and my first interactions with dealing with New Yorkers was definitely interesting. It was very brash. Who are you? What are you doing here? Why have they sent you? All this kind of stuff. And yeah, essentially another quite amusing thing I remember was President's Day. So that February, 6 weeks in, I
Yeah.
went to interview my first employee. So I was here literally by myself, with the goal or the target of basically making and building a sustainable, profitable business within 2 years. That was pretty much the engagement. If you do it, great. We'll review. If you don't, we'll pay for you to go back to UK, but you won't have a job. So that was pretty much the terms in which I took the role. And on President's Day, I started interviewing people, and it was only afterwards, once I'd actually employed someone, they were like, "You do realise that was a public holiday?" I was like, "I had no idea." And yet it was the start of, I guess, many of the sort of idiosyncrasies of getting used to a different way of life, a different culture. Um, yeah, just many sort of learnings, and I think that was what struck me about that sort of first period.
Why were you going back and forth every weekend just to see the family? It
Yeah, pretty
wasn't.
much. Yeah, I mean, we hadn't prepared for the move. My kids were very young at the time, sort of one and maybe three at best.
Oh wow.
Looking at where we might live. I mean, like you go through that process of where would you like to live? Do you want to be in the city? Do you want to be in the outskirts? I was in suburbs in the UK. So you get here, and like the Connecticut shore, like you said, the shoreline, all those things that are the slopes an hour away, all these different way of life. And I was like, let's give that a shot. And we chose to live, like you say, in the Greenwich area. But that did mean that I would commute into the city. So that
Wait,
just became
you've
the way of
got you've
life.
got a you've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and you are launching, having got have the pressure of being new to New York City. You have the pressure of launching a new business from scratch and making it profitable in 2 years. You have the pressure of finding a place to settle and then bring your family out, and then you have the pressure of going back every weekend just to see them and say hello, I'm still here, and I guess relieve your wife as well, because she must. I mean, that's a heavy burden on her.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's a everybody gets involved in it. It's a bit of a sort of, everybody has to build into the journey. And I've seen have friends that, it hasn't worked out for them because partner's not been, has not settled, or, hasn't got used to that change. It is big. It's a big move. It just maybe reminded me actually of a funny story. So when we finally did actually get a rental property, I was like, right, I better get some curtains in before they all turn up. So I went to IKEA in Brooklyn without a
Okay.
car because I couldn't get a car because I didn't realise, unbeknown to me, that your credit history doesn't move even if you bank with the same
Yeah.
bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't have enough. liquidity at the time to purchase a car. So I had to work through all of that. But essentially, I went to IKEA in Brooklyn, brought, I couldn't even tell you, maybe 10 curtain rods and poles and whatever else. Was stood in the snow outside IKEA waiting for an Uber to take it back to basically ensure that the curtains were up when by the time when kids arrived. So yeah, that was I was thinking about that earlier. That was a funny memory.
Well,
Just,
so wait, so the January, for how long did it go before you got them out here?
yeah, it was about 6 weeks. So
Oh,
those six weeks of
okay.
going back and forth, it wasn't too bad. I think it was maybe a little bit longer because of the there was quite bad snow that year.
Yeah.
So we had flight cancellations, and people, Manhattan was like that snowmageddon type thing, and yeah, bunkered down, and I mean, it feels like it was probably you just do these things, right? You get into
Like,
it, it's an adventure, and
as you did. What do they say the most stressful things in your life are? Moving house, having kids, starting a business, moving countries. And you basically did it all in the space of 3 months. Everything condensed into 3 months.
pretty much, yeah. And
That must have been a nut. I mean, do you? One of the beauties of being a human is when you go through hard times, the memories, the hard stuff fades. You just remember the lessons and the good stuff, right?
it's very
Um,
true.
but if you look back on that first 6 months, 3 months, like
I think,
what's your
yeah.
abiding memory?
I mean, I would say for all of us as a family at the time, it was an adventure, and we just applied it that way. So it was a bit like, for the first, probably even, Rich, to be honest with you, first 18 months, it felt like you're on vacation. I mean, it was like literally you're just, new experience. We're trying here, we're going to travel around. Meanwhile, uh, the business side was interesting. It was challenging for sure, but it was, we started to pick up momentum, pick up some clients, and that side of it was exciting as well. So it sort of brought you along any of the challenges that you had with that. Um, and there were some for sure, but like you just kind of work through it. It's kind of, yeah. You either describe it like Marmite, isn't it? And I'm sure as an expat yourself, you look at it, but you either love it or you hate it. You can't be like middle ground. It's like you've got to embrace it. You've got to take it on for what it is, um, in my opinion. And then if you do, you get the benefits of it.
Everyone comes for 2 years, and that's not just to America.
Mhm.
And it's just a story people tell themselves to make themselves. You just go. We did it. You go with the mindset. Okay, I'll do this for 2 years, and I'll come back. Or I can come back. And in my experience, people either don't last that long because it just doesn't work, and they just know straight away. Um, so they return back to wherever they come from, usually the UK, or they're still here 20 years later having this conversation with me asking, how did you end up here?
Yeah,
Think
100%.
about
It's 100%. It's like, especially if there's kids involved, because it becomes part of their
Oh, right.
lifestyle, and schooling and all these different things. And after a while, you build the community, you build your friendships and
Right.
all those things. So,
I didn't truly think about that because my wife and I, we've moved several times, a couple of different countries, and you just think, oh, we can keep doing this. But then now we've done exactly that, right? We've got a business here, I've got a house here, I've got two kids here, they're in school, we've got them into schools here. And you suddenly realise, like, okay, I'm not going anywhere.
hmm.
I'm not uprooting them, I'm not putting them through that again. And so you go from without it's like putting the frog into boiling water, right, or heating the water up around them. That's what happened with us. We didn't realize. You just always think, and I always get itchy feet. You just think, oh, I'll just keep bouncing around until you realize that you've built this life around you, and that ain't going to happen. Much to our family's chagrin, I think, in the UK. But yeah, we're here now for the foreseeable. I'm interested to know how it went from. How did you find going from London working or UK working to New York / America working? You're in the same field, right? But was it dramatically different? Was it the same but different?
Yeah, dramatically different. I think, yeah, again, we speak the same language and common language, but it's so different at times. I think culturally,
Yeah,
obviously, being in America, Americans will tell you as well that New York's so different to everywhere else in America. So not only were you taking on America, you're taking on New York, which is a whole ball of wax in itself. Um, I had to adapt incredibly around just the sheer directness of people, and um, culturally, the other big one when we were starting to really build a business and bring people on board was I couldn't get over how people just wouldn't take vacation. They wouldn't take holiday. They wouldn't take time for themselves. And genuinely, many people were like, well, if I'm not here for a day, someone else could be doing my job. And I was just like, oh, wow. So we very much sort of had I
Do you think
guess,
it's still like that?
to a degree, yeah. I think people, I'm fairly, personally, I think it's super important to take time for yourself, take time out, recharge, refresh. When you tell people about the fact Spain goes on leave for August kind of thing, they're like, how on earth? I think it's a changing. In our company now, we've definitely got younger generation that are taking time out around things like children and maternity and stuff like that, and doing it what I would consider properly. But yeah, it's culturally just driven to work. So I think one of the biggest things and learnings I learned early doors was just set your boundaries. So like, people can be working all weekends in what is essentially a Monday to Friday job. And, unless you're careful, you get caught up in it. And I think it's important to sort of maintain the balance that we probably have in the UK, but that moving over and seeing that and making sure and protecting that was really important and has been ever since.
Yeah. I've always worked, not set my own hours, right, but kind of almost I have done, and now I have my own business. I'm able to, and so I've never really got sucked into that. But I've seen it around me, and it's kind of a dead. I mean, it's not a dead end because people use it to climb the ladder, but it's you just kind of get trapped you get trapped in a box there's kind of it's no quality of life. It's not quality of life I would choose.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, being a B2B agency as well, you had corporates and customers on the other end that, again, there was expectations where you work 24/7. And,
You felt that expectation.
oh, 100%. Yeah,
You
definitely. But again, if you set the boundaries and you set the expectations back with people, then I think it's been fine. But I think unless you're doing that, people just assume and they work through it. And, a number of people, I'd say, you leave your laptop in the office while you're going away to St. Lucia for that week, because otherwise they're sat there on the beach. And I'm just like, that's culturally, that's how I see that a lot. And it's like you're on holiday for a reason. Go and enjoy it. It's like it's been interesting, that's for sure.
did you get any pushback? Have you ever had pushback for have you ever had people expect more of you?
Yeah, I think you're always going to get that. But again, I've just been. I feel that if you set the expectations, set the standards, and you deliver, then I don't think we've really had any. Well, put it this way: all the businesses I've been involved with have had consistent growth, and it comes back to respect from both sides in any customer relationship. So I think that's otherwise, frankly, don't want to work with them. So,
No, of course. I just wonder,
yeah.
sometimes as well, if there's an element of envy. I wish I could do that, and I wish, Like, I'm not convinced Americans want to work 24/7, especially when they've got kids. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do.
No, I think it's adapting and changing, and it's generational. But yeah, that would be my experiences back in the early stage of being over here for sure.
Yeah. Let's go back a bit further. Tell me, you were a chef, right? Go back. Tell me how it all began and how you ended up working in events.
Yeah, so I guess pretty wild. I didn't do great in my final years at school. I the opportunity to go to college or to university was to do a hospitality degree. My parents thought it would be wonderful because I was pretty practical by nature. And in the holidays, I would be doing sort of working in hotels, and I grew up in Windsor in Berkshire. And you would have, hotels there as well as outdoor events that were built around, obviously tourism and other things. Always enjoyed it. Thought I'd give it a shot. So yeah, it really involved everything from basically how would you run a business side of it, which became very interesting with running a hotel, but also the practical side. So literally classes around chefing, um, in knowing wines, things like that. So Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock was wine tasting, which probably isn't the best time, but after a Monday night in Leeds where I went. And it sort of boomed from there. You would have had a year out, so I worked at Marriott Hotels through a friend who was a GM of a Marriott, and it kind of snowballed from there. I then ended up doing a top-up degree, which was a year in event management. So that was a sort of slight diversification, but all of it really was a business degree. But I kept the chefing side going, and I was due to take on a role straight out of university. I had three friends that had got on a plane and gone to New Zealand, and I was like, I'm not sure I'm ready to work actually. So I ended up walking into Windsor one weekend about a week before I was due to start working. Bought a backpack, bought a tent, bought a sleeping bag, bought a ticket, and was on the plane to New Zealand. And I came back something like 15, 16 months later, having worked as a chef or chefing or outdoor catering around Australia, pretty much everywhere, outdoor events from the Melbourne Grand Prix through to a number of the large golf events, through to things like Easter Show, where they bring the country to the city. Some really cool experiences, kept it going, was loving exploring, seeing places. Carried on and did Japan, did some of Indonesia, and a few other spots, and then came back. And I decided that at that point, probably chefing and going into hotels, or whilst I love the hospitality side, chefing's a really tough career for anyone that wants a family or manage a family. A job came up at a small agency, and that was around live events, pharmaceutical companies specifically. And then kind of like went from there. So loved going a lot of travel, both in the UK, Europe, and further. A lot of the initial travel was also to the US. So it was big conferences, and you were going to these events with like 30,000 people and stuff like that. And you were taking a on behalf of a pharmaceutical company, generally doctors to symposiums and various things like that. And yeah, just a wild range of sort of events and experiences and operating them, to then starting to get more into the business side of things. So that was kind of like how I really ended up into agency life. I still retain the chefing. I love it. I find it very relaxing. I hang
Find
out
it
on
relaxing.
weekends.
Now you don't have to do it for a job. Have you seen The Bear?
Oh, I've heard of it. I've not seen it yet, but I have heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great program. I bet it's about a chef, right? And there's in the first season, there's not a scene, it's an entire episode where the machine that spits out the orders, right? There's been a malfunction, so they have this they just have all these orders that haven't come through. And then they suddenly all come through at once, just one after another, after another, after another, and it just shows the pandemonium, like just the stress. And for anyone who has ever worked in a kitchen or related, I was a waiter.
Yeah.
One of those days or nights where it just all goes wrong,
Yeah.
and my cortisol levels just rose just watching it. Right, it just took me straight back to a couple of really bad days, bad, but amazing in hindsight.
Yeah.
You get through it, but it's stressful. It's so stressful.
I just find that I said to my kids, you don't ask, and they're keen, and they sometimes cook with me and stuff like that. But I'm like, it's such a good environment because you learn how to work under stress and under pressure. You work into deadlines, you work in a disciplined way, all those things, and work as a team as well, and generally as well. So it's a great experience. That's fun.
Yeah, I get that. I wouldn't want to be a chef as a career, but for what you said, it's just the hours and and the stress every night. But I can see how it's an incredibly good grounding for so many things.
Definitely.
Yeah. So then, yeah, you found yourself into the corporate world, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it's like almost like a sliding doors moment. This really, the Singapore. Could you have ended up in Singapore, or were you like umming and ahhing, and then it's like, oh well, decision made for me. It's New York.
Yeah, kind of. I definitely have been attracted to Asia, and then when so again, rolling forward 2015, the business had grown. We'd gone through that 2 year period. There was constant growth, and I was aware that the company was due to sell as part of a bigger global company. There was interest, and I was very aware being in New York because there was a lot of US interest in the global company. Opportunity came up in Hong Kong, so same thing. Went over there to look at that. Um, I think there's something fascinating about work again, just working in those different cultures. I think you mentioned that you get itchy feet. You're like, well, I could do this again because it builds the confidence that you know you can, you've succeeded, if that's the right word,
Yeah.
and you can go and do it again. And
And it's Barry.
it's
That's a very when you just look when you just need it's you, your backpack, and your tent. No problem. When it's you, your backpack, your tent, your house, your kids, your
yeah,
dogs.
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, it's
Mm,
not going to happen.
it's a different issue, and yeah, and I think there's a level of stability and things like that. Like you said, it's becomes important. Um, But yeah, I'd say yeah, Singapore originally was definitely attractive. Hong Kong was attractive, but it just didn't work out. So I ended up staying in New York, but I moved businesses to the best to first, and that journey's been again incredible. So I joined first in 2015, really to help build on the global side of their business. There's about 100, employees at the time. And we're now upwards of 800.
Whoa,
Uh, yeah, so
whoa,
it's been
wow,
crazy. And we were
yeah,
in three, really, we were in New York, London, and Singapore at the time. We still are in terms of our sort of hub locations, but we're in about 12 markets now. And a lot of that has obviously been through global client relationships, expanding what we do really well. And um, again, I just thrive on that the global nature of the work, the cultural um, experiences that you gain from working with people in different markets and learning about doing work in different countries. So it's been great.
yeah. So this might be you've been here a while, but would you have a preference? Comparing it to working in the UK, similar role but UK, do you prefer it here now? You're more accustomed to it here. Would you? I mean, I have no preference. It's just different.
Yeah, I kind of always say that I'm metaphorically as well as mentally somewhere in the middle of the pond. I'm, my family very close to. They're all in the UK. They come over quite a lot. Friends, do great in the UK, but they're equally like curious about the journey that I've been on over here. I think from certainly my kids' point of view, they are, they enjoy it both sides of the pond again, and they're in fact my daughter who's potentially looking at colleges is looking at colleges at both sides of the pond. For me, I think I always say there's just more opportunity here, and frankly, being here, being British, being having global experience, they're all attractive to a US business, where that doesn't, that's not for to and plenty. So I think the UK's, I mean, look, I love the UK. It's still home in a way, but I just found that there's more opportunity. I also think the mindset's slightly different. Say over here, it's like, again, probably part of that is myself, but also Americans there's a much more sort of, we tend to diss it as Brits, don't we? But it's like very open, very positive. And if you take it on face value, it really helps your own positivity and your own mindset and what you can achieve. And we chatted before about sort of the American dream. There's lots of people that have achieved that, and whatever that may be. But like I think I go back and I'm still incredibly tight with my mates, and several of them have never moved beyond 5 miles of where they've grown
Mm.
up, So there's a very distinct sort of difference, I guess.
There's one thing one theme that's come out of all these podcasts. It's just opportunity, and I
Mm.
completely agree with it. But then I wrestle with it because there's just more opportunity here. There's more opportunity to earn more, and there's more opportunity to progress quicker in your career, whatever that might be. But then I have to ask myself, does that go back to what we were talking about earlier? Is that because they work 24/7? So do you only get one because of the other, or is it possible? And what we're trying to do here at my firm is we're trying to like, and I was talking to this on another podcast recently. We're trying to tap into the American opportunity and create a business that can capitalize on that, whilst bringing some of the European kind of working norms into it. And I want to achieve that. I want to. That's the kind of business I want to build. But I also ask myself, like, is this an impossible task? You can't have one without the other.
I think you're spot on. I think I'll give you a simple example. If you're successful here and you earn money, people are scared to tell you, are they? They're very open about it. It's very much celebrated. Now, we're quite reserved as Brits in general, and I think, that there's that side of it where, okay, what else can I be doing for you? Where's the like from a wealth point of view? It is different. There's more opportunity here. There's a greater earning potential. What do you do with that earning? And there's definitely sort of what will happen once my kids go to college or whatever. Who knows? But there's definitely a period where you can see, wealth isn't just the only side of it, but opportunities that I would be earning, simply, I'm earning 40-50% more by
Yeah,
being in the US than I would ever do in the
yeah.
UK.
And our cost of living is higher here, but it's not 40 to
Agreed.
50% higher. And it wasn't. I believe it wasn't always. The York. I think the cost of living in America has exploded in recent years. I think 30 years ago there was still more opportunity, but the cost of living wasn't as great. It's got crazy expensive here.
I agree. Yeah. I guess there's also a side of me that says it's not going backwards. I would never describe it as going backwards, but your mindset's been so much about growth, about being here, about all these different experiences. To then it would need to be something very attractive, very exciting to make me want to change what I'm doing. And I think that's you kind of get on a cycle. I'm sure you've probably experienced it yourself, right?
Could you see yourself leaving here one day? Are you, or not?
Well, I guess honestly don't know. I think it's things evolve and life changes, and I'm going through a period where like I said, my kids are in high school and they're loving it. It's great to see them develop, but once they leave, who knows? And I'm up for more experiences. Definitely, I'm up for being trying and challenging myself. Probably once more, for sure. Where that is, open, keep my mind open. I always try to live life that way and see where things evolve.
Yeah, it's one of the things with advising expats is you can never say never. So you have to like plan, but be flexible.
Super good way of putting it.
And things can change on a dime, especially once you don't no longer have the ties that you're talking about. Let's talk about family, right? So you had kids in the UK.
Yep.
So they're presumably obviously British, and then you moved to the US when they were young, and they have grown up here, and I presume they're US citizens as well now.
They are.
Yeah. So they're dual citizens, born in the UK, come of age in the US.
Yeah.
So how can you reflect on that experience, both from them and their development, but also you as a parent, perhaps?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I mean, there's so much in that. I think the schooling's interesting. In fact, 2017, we did go back for a year or so, back to UK to see whether we wanted at the time the kids to do the majority of the sort of.
Wait, you just went back to the UK for a year?
Yeah, it was proposed to be a bit longer, but essentially at the time we decided that it wasn't right, and the change, like you said, had been earlier. The
So
upheaval meant that we rolled back into US life, so we came back.
and so was that prior to your oldest going of high school age? So you were seeing part of the reason was to see,
Correct,
okay, like
correct.
we either commit to American high school or British high school. Like, yeah, I get that.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was interesting itself because my son was playing some of the sports I used to play. You see him, and never forced anything. Never have done. It's not my character. But I was like, it's interesting seeing him playing rugby and playing cricket and
Mm.
hanging out with the grandparents and things like that. And then come back here, he's loving it. But he's a high school ice hockey player. So
Hmm.
there's that side of it. I think my and yeah, my both of them are we're definitely here for the schooling, and the quality of schooling is excellent. So and there's more support for them, I think, here than there would be in the UK. So both of them have had
You mean in school?
in school, yeah, they've benefited from just just the nature of how schools are here, and maybe specific to Western, but to the level that we wouldn't have experienced back in the UK. Um, my daughter, who's the older one, can turn on the British accent and turn
Hmm.
it off. My
That's a gift.
That's
That's a
hilarious. It's
it's power.
yeah. And then my son is 15 or so months younger, full American, fully American, and yeah,
Well, how was that for them going from America to the UK for you? Did they slot right in, or was it? It must have been.
I think
How was?
it's gonna be challenging. I mean, especially there's a couple of little things that, well, not little in the grand scheme of things. One of them's the curriculum's completely different, which
Yeah.
I don't think we fully realised. So that was and then trying to integrate into a school in leafy Surrey, frankly. And part of it, interestingly, part of it, going back to what you were talking about earlier, was to reduce my commute. So I was working in London. All of a sudden, the commute was half. We were close enough to family that we could see them when we wanted to. Um, but in the end, the draw overall was to come back to the US, and that was kind of the call we made at the time.
Was the whole family on board with that? Was it, or was there anyone?
I think it was, yeah, I wouldn't say it was completely fully aligned, but that's what you do, and but that was how it was at the time, and you don't regret it in any way. It was great. We're happy to be here. The kids are happy to be here, and they've continued their experience here, and I'm interested just by my daughter especially. Well, both of them are, but they're curious by nature. They're very interested in different. They get to travel quite a bit. We go back to England every summer, and we try and go to a different country while we're there, things like that. So, they're building their own lives and building experiences along the way. So it's
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever reflect? I mean, I do this. I wonder what if I'd had kids in the UK, would I have parented different to being in the US? I think I would. I mean, I think there's more parents are more involved here. I think they're and sometimes that can turn toxic, obviously, but and maybe it's a generational thing, right? Maybe I'm comparing my generation parenting with a previous generation, so maybe that's imperfect, but it's more hands on. I think here, and there's much more. Maybe this aren't the burbs, but oh my goodness, the activities. It can be hard at times, but also it's good. Like we're exposed them to so much.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's I've got friends with kids the same age back in the UK, and I feel like they grow up faster in the UK. They're forced to grow up faster. They're definitely a lot more exposed. When I think about, my daughter now is already driving at 16, but she can't do many other things that you would be able to do in the UK, which makes me like, even this. this week. I had to call in sick for it. I'm like, I have to call in sick, but you can drive yourself to school. That just seems balmy to me, right? Or yeah, which is fair enough because those are the rules. But I think, yeah, just in general, I think the UK you're definitely exposed to more, which I don't necessarily think is a good thing.
I agree. We talked about
Yeah.
this. I think was it you and me last time? We
Mm.
talked about your daughter going to college, and there's a different alcohol culture, which we were part of, very much
Yeah.
enthusiastically part
Yeah.
of, I might add, which I thought was great at the time. But with hindsight, looking back, I don't think it was so good. And I'm glad that my kids are gonna not be
Yeah.
exposed to it in the same way we were from the same age we were.
Yeah, they're just in general, they're just not interested. There's not that interest in say partying, but to like you said, that kind of lifestyle. But yeah, it's definitely changing in the UK as well, but it's still there. But when you explain about sort of being in pubs or that type of side of things, they get it, but it's kind of alien because it just doesn't. It's not like that here.
You know, from a selfish perspective as well, it was a client who pointed this out to me as I'm in conversation with him. And he said, yeah, it's also great because you go into a pub here and there's no kids. And I was like, there's not. You know, when you go into a pub in the UK, there could be a 16-year-old in there. There could be a 15-year-old in there. I don't.
Although that's an interesting one because I have always said that American by nature are much more accommodating to kids in like restaurants and things like that, which I found very helpful, especially when the kids were younger. But I just
100%.
think it's really cool because it like just creates a nice
Okay,
vibe and
right.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Let me differentiate here. I mean, so I agree with you, and I'll expand on this in a second. But I agree with you, and I love that actually about America. It has made parenting much easier, and it's reduced my stress levels because I think I carry this British mentality. When kids start making noise, I immediately get a bit scared about it. But I've
Yeah.
learned to like. Americans are pretty cool with it actually, and I
Mm.
appreciate that. What I meant was a
Mm.
group of 16-year-olds in the corner being loud, being obnoxious, and being drunk. You know, maybe I've got some personal
Yeah.
experience of this. um, that's what that's what I don't
Yeah,
miss.
no, I
That's what
completely agree.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
kids in pubs, yeah. You know, right. I think what you've just touched on, and I didn't realize it was a thing until I started speaking to a mother at my son's school. She's Brazilian. She's lived in London, and now she lives in Westchester with young kids. And she said the British and Europe, no, British actually. She said Dutch was different. The British mentality to kids is, put them away and keep them quiet. And
Yeah.
and you get judged if you're out and your kids are making noise. And some of the stuff she told me, comments and stuff on trains, that were really horrible. And then she
Mm.
contrasted that to I've only ever had kids in America, and she contrasted
Mm.
that to kids in America, and she said, you're going welcomed in restaurants, and I thought back to flights we've had where people were like super friendly with us, and then I reflected that maybe some of the anxiety that I was bringing into these situations, the flights and restaurants, was from my expectation of being of the UK and not from my experience in America. And
What's
that
the
was
phrase?
a light bulb moment for me.
Is it to be seen and not heard? Isn't that what
Yeah,
they used to say?
like a pretty
Yeah. Yeah.
toxic thing
Yeah.
to raise your kid in that environment.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I remember being on a plane once. We were going on JetBlue down south somewhere, and his son was about 3 or 4, and he's standing on the seat, and like it just got to the point where he needed a parachute, he needed to fall out. And a couple of Americans just got up and were like, "Come here, buddy." Just walked him
Yeah.
down the plane, back and forth, and blah blah blah. And in about 30 seconds, he calmed down completely and whatever else. And parents at the time, you spent 2 hours trying to placate your child, and after a while, as you know, it's like,
Right. Contrast that with the story this lady told me. Was they were on a train in Portugal, and her son was doing a similar thing to what your son was doing, and instead some British person made a snide comment to her about controlling her children, and then a friend of ours. Her son is a year older than my kid's son, and they were flying to, I think, Barbados from the UK. And her son, she had one of those flights that you just dread, right? You know where, and she was stressed, and it must have been horrible. And then when they were getting off a plane, it's the woman in front of her looked at her, and our friend said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and this woman just didn't acknowledge it, just stared at her and then stormed off. And like, come on, guy! Like,
Yeah, you
I
were
got in a
child,
fight
right?
recently, and I got in a fight, and we were right next to a brand new family, like tiny little baby, tiny baby, brand new. So I just made a point of saying, "Oh, guys, first trip. We saw you getting on with all the stuff. Like, yeah, well, we've done this, but this is our first trip without our kids, just to let them know, like, you got an ally here. It's okay.
Yeah,
Don't if we start screaming, don't worry."
yeah,
So I just want to pay it forward now.
exactly.
I do think this parenting culture is different, and
Mm.
they're definitely more hands-on here. But then the flip side is we have to worry about guns and all that stuff. We won't go there now, but there is,
Yeah, I was going to say that's a whole ball of wax. Let's not go there.
yeah. Right. Well, so look, Barry, this is a podcast about being an expat in America. So something I ask all guests, we've kind of touched on it, but it is, what does the American dream mean to you, if anything?
Wow. I think it's about opportunity. It's about embracing the culture, embracing chance to see all of the diversity of America. I think that's one thing that people kind of lose track of is like, oh, what's it like to be in Italy or Greece or wherever else? I'm like, what's it like to be in Montana or Wyoming,
Yeah.
Mississippi or whatever else? I mean, I've so much in the US that's so culturally rich.
Have you done that? Have you indulged in that? Because I haven't really. Since I've travelled
Yeah.
more as a tourist before I moved here than I have as a resident, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, over the years, definitely. I think we're up to about 25 states.
Oh, really?
Different. Tried to adopt that with the kids as well. So, yeah, all states.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, you've got quite a lot of diversity at school, which is important. There is definitely,
Yeah.
it's important to get. But equally, I look at it and go, there's many things that we would never have been able to achieve. I would never have been able to achieve if I wasn't here. So that's very much the value and the benefit of being here. And I think positive mindset, growth mindset, those kind of things. That's been part of this whole experience, and yes, it's definitely been rewarding over the years for sure.
Yeah, very cool. Do you believe? So when I say the American dream, do you believe it is a thing, or?
I think that it wasn't necessarily the dream for me personally, but I think I see why people look at it that way, and I definitely see when, for example, doing citizenship, that's very much it's for other people from different countries and stuff. You can absolutely see why it's the American dream, because it gives them a life and an opportunity that they'll never be able to, in some cases they're escaping from as well. And that's, again, that's such a benefit of this country. So you can definitely see why it is that on a general scale. I think it was more, again, an experience, I'd say, rather than a dream. But it's been amazing. And if you embrace it and you dive in and you ride the wave of any of the sort of challenges that come with it or the learnings, then you can flourish for sure.
Yeah, challenges are inevitable. Right, Barry, where can people find you if they want to hunt you down following this episode?
Oh my word. LinkedIn is a good place. For sure, that's probably where I'm most active. And by all means, happy to field any questions or provide any advice, or if there's opportunities, by all means, I'm always open to it. So, cool.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, well, Barry, thank you for being a guest on Always an Expat.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Rich.
Top man. See ya.